So good evening, everybody. I hope you had a good weekend. We're having fun this weekend doing the long-term course. We had a nice crowd in, and it was quite interesting. I mean, I saw some nice stuff. It's because every time I do the course, there is always something new because everything is done live. So there is a couple of nice setups I want to share with you. But anyway, like what we do every week, we're going to start looking at our indices, and there has been a couple of nice things and nice setups that should be helping us in our decision-making process next week. This is what we had last week. The yen was actually a little strong, the pound was slightly weak, the euro was weak, the Swiss, I mean, this is what we did from last Saturday. This is not what happened, but this was the and the dollar was kind of neutral, if you will. So anyway, just to take a quick look. I just want to, the reason I'm showing you this is that there has been some changes in the market from last week. So if you look at the dollar, it was kind of neutral, if you will, looking at last week, and as you can see, pretty much this week, all of last week was kind of neutral. If you look at the euro, which we expected the bias to the downside, it's still, we had one up day and it's still moving in this kind of a range. But if you look at the Swiss, I'm going to stay to the end. This is one of the first interesting things, is that it is sitting now at the structure point. It kind of started turning back down again. So the Swiss is weakening, even though last week it was according to the plan. It was not doing much. But here is the interesting part. If you look at the yen, you look at the Aussie was strong, the yen was strong. Now if you look at the Aussie, we had this kind of a sell-off on Friday, and it came down, and now it is sitting on the index on the breaking point, which is the 103.89 on the index. And what's much more interesting too, if you look at the Japanese yen, this just for the last 3 days, it just broke through the structure and it started coming to breaking down, and it has triggered a long-term sell signal on the strategy. Right the day before yesterday, on Thursday, it issued the yen in general issued a long-term sell signal. So, and the last one is the Canadian dollar, which was, again, is still strong. It is still on a buy, and it's still holding. So to take the events of what happened last week, or the changes that took place from last week, is that the yen has turned around and they began selling the yen. So now the yen we will be looking at the yen from the short side, And the Australian dollar also is now sitting at the structural point. The euro is doing nothing. They're still looking at the events, but still we do still have our bearish prospect on the euro, and we're looking for a further decline. The Swiss is below the structure, and the last but not least is the pound, and this is like what we have been discussing. Look at the two structure points, the 157.36 and the 156.89. These are comparable to the 157.06 on the spot, and what's the other number? It's the 157.06. So to kind of get the general bias of the whole week, you would see that the dollar is neutral, if you will, to slightly positive, because we haven't gotten any sell signal, but we are still below the 82.80, which is the structural point. And we did not have a capitulation to the downside. So we just broke below the structure point, which is the 82.80, yet we have been sitting, and we closed the week at 82.66. We're just about, let's say, 20 pips or so from the structure point, and we didn't get any capitulation. So we would be looking at the dollar, let's say, let's call it this way here, as slightly positive. Kind of, we are going to be kind of neutral on the dollar, but we wanted to really get above the 82.80 on the index before we start adding up. So this means buying the dollar Swiss, the dollar yen, the dollar shorting the Aussie dollar and the like. The yen is now on a sell. So the yen is going to be the pair that we're going to be looking at selling it. So the yen is our short. Give it two negatives. And as you can see, we're coming down, so we should come down and test the next level of structure, which is the 125.42. We are just 30 pips away from that, so most probably we are going to get, this is going to act like a magnet, and it's going to pull the prices down. This is the 125.42 right there. And it's quite a significant point, because as you can see, it has, when it broke it back in March of this year, we really had a very nice sell-off after that, but it has been holding the same range in this area during the month of July. So what we're going to, the way we're going to play it, we're going to be looking at buying the pound yen, we're looking at buying the euro yen, we're looking at buying the dollar yen, maybe looking at the Swiss yen, the CAD yen, and then once it breaks or tests the 125.42, we're going to go now and keep an eye after the break whether it is going to resume or to continue to the downside, or it is going to hold like this. So the plan would be, if it does break the structure here, we immediately going to place our stop. Right after that, we're going to begin to look for any possible short covering rally above that. So first we're looking for a continuation to the downside, and we are going to wait for it to penetrate below the 125.42, and at that moment we start looking and placing our stop, and we're looking for a reversal simply because of this, all these events that took place when it comes and tests the 125. So if it shorts, then we stay with it. If it flips, then we're going to flip. The next one we want to keep an eye on is the Aussie dollar. This is now sitting, as I said, at the structural point, which is the 103.89 based on the index, which is the 104.73, the one we will be trading on the spot, and therefore our trade in the Aussie is very easy. Any trade below that, then we're definitely going to short the Aussie across the board, but we are going to refrain from shorting the Aussie yen. So the bias for the Aussie is to the short side. The bias to the Aussie is to the short side, but since the yen is really weak, we are going to maybe take the Aussie dollar, take the pound dollar, take the euro, the pound Aussie, the euro Aussie, maybe we're looking at those. The euro dollar, this has been fairly neutral. It's not really going anywhere. So if we want to be trading the euro in any aspect, we are going to pair it with the weak currencies. And the weak currency in this case, because this is kind of neutral, we're going to pair it with the Aussie or with the yen. And if we are going to be trading a trade in the euro, we're going to be short. We're going to have if we're going to buy the euro, it is going to be with the short term. We're not going to look to buy the euro and hold it for a very long period of time, because as you see on the chart, there is no real strength in the euro. What we simply have is weakness in the crosses, weakness in the Aussie, weakness in the yen, weakness in the and that's the basic two. As far as the CAD goes, this is quite strong, and the only thing we had, if we had the weakness on Friday, but if you look at the weekly chart for the Canadian dollar, it's pushing higher, and so far it seems to be the strongest currency. And the close that we had, I mean, when we have any doubts about looking at the chart from the daily, either we go to a higher level, which is the weekly chart, or we go to a smaller level so that we can test and get a judgment call. And in this case, you can see that the close is above the previous weekly high. The previous weekly high is the 1008.7, so we're about 30-40 pips away from having any sell signal on the Canadian dollar. So we're going to stick with the CAD on the long side, and this is what we had from last week. The Swiss, this is the weekly chart for the Swiss. It's you can see that, let me put the daily chart, it's clearer. I mean, there hasn't been really much action in the Swiss. The chart looks pretty much identical to the chart of the euro. I mean, if you look at this area over here, it is pretty much identical to the chart of the euro. I mean, you really can't, this is the euro right there, and you can see it's just tested the structure, it bounced back up, it's still inside the previous daily range. This is actually a sell signal for the euro dollar, for the euro as a whole, because it failed to stay above the previous day. So that is a sell signal for the euro, but it is inside the previous day. And we have, if you look at this bar over here, this is a sell signal on Friday morning, and it traded below the 123.05, and then it came back and it closed at 123 at 103.24. I'm sorry, 123.24. So you have a buy signal coming back above the structure point, and you have a sell signal from the daily. So this is as neutral as it gets with a weak bias. So basically, if you're going to be trading the euro dollar, we want to match it up with the strongest currency. Again, that is, as I said, it is kind of a neutral. Last but not least is the British pound. And this is just coiling. This is coiling. There is no strength anywhere to trade above the 157.06 based on the index, based on the spot cash, or above the 157.36 based upon the index. So we closed the week at 156.90. The structural point is 156.89. So the same pattern that you see here is the same image that we see on the Swiss. It's the same image that we see on the euro. And those basically are the three ones that we have to be kind of cautious about trading. So we are going to pick I would say it is negative to slightly positive, not the other way around. I mean, the other ones might be positive to slightly negative, but this is negative to slightly positive simply because it is still in the coiling. So the ones we want to be looking at right now initially is basically to be shorting the yen and looking at shorting the Aussie. So let's do this. So we're looking at the dollar from a positive, so I can take the dollar Aussie, shorting the Aussie dollar. As soon as it breaks below the structure point, we're looking at the CAD, so we can do the Aussie CAD. Going short the Aussie CAD. We can go looking at the Euro Aussie. We might be looking at going long the Euro Aussie. We are going to look at shorting the yen. So we're going to go long the dollar yen, long the CAD yen, maybe long the pound yen, and maybe long the euro and the Aussie yen. So we'll be looking at shorting the yen. We're looking to go long the dollar. We're going to go long the Canadian dollar, and we are going to get our signals for the pound and the euro from the daily charts on the spot. Okay, so there hasn't been much of too excitement happening except the big break that we had in the yen and the closeness it is in the Swiss franc. So let me save the record.